Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today will be the beginning of me touching base on the key elements of my court case and the evidence that's been supported or submitted in court in my file from the beginning of when I actually lodged my case with the using the justice system. Okay, at the end of my case, and as the main evidence is gathered together, the public will get the understanding of how the project or the scam that I've been subject to and the danger that will put you and your families under if you participate without knowing the other person's side of facts or vision, or in other words, playing games with people's lives. You will learn that someone else's truth is not necessarily the truth unless both sides of the story is heard fairly before an unbiased, prejudiced, or racist audience. What I mean by this, fresh evidence should be heard in front of an audience where both sides of the story, from both parties are being heard fairly before a tribunal. But yeah, in my case, obviously what's been happening to me has been out of my control. But this is my story and this is my case, so I'll be telling it in my own words. But discrimination is usually a form of a group of individuals who've joined forces to take over another individual's personal territory. And while no one wants to be on the wrong side of the law or be made out to be wrong, unless both sides of have been heard fairly, anything outside of that remains not communicable or credible. So today I will be telling what I would call a horror story in my own words, and also in my own words I wanted to tell what actually happened from my own personal path, as far as the reasons why I lodge complaints with using the justice system, and if you have been watching all of my video clips that I've already put on my page, you'd see that in my introductions I've actually kind of sort of done this, dedicated this channel to one of my friends whom I would say did save my life. And so really I'm just wanting to have in remembrance of her, and also to hopefully help somebody else not go to look out for what to look out for if you've been subject to a scam or human trafficking. As time will go on, you'll understand what I'm talking about with human trafficking. But human trafficking it sneaks up on you, and today with everything technology, you're really no match to the opposition unless you are aware of your surroundings and what's happening to you, your rights and the laws and what you can do about it. What I do suggest is never go alone if possible. It is really, really serious and dangerous situation to be in it. Okay, I won't be mentioning any names, but if you have been watching me on Facebook, those who know me or I've already spoken to or have been involved in the case in the past will be able to understand or know who really I'm directing or who I'm actually indicating, because they've been involved in my case behind the scene. But I won't be mentioning any names, but I call this my horror story because it has been a horrific experience for me. While life, everyone has a story to tell, but this one has been the hardest for me. But when I look back at the situation and the decision that I had made at the time, yes, I'll have to say I had no other options but make the decisions that I had actually made at that time was actually right for me. Okay, in the beginning of my videos on the introduction, I had mentioned about two women whom I was close to, and I really was close to both of them. When I get involved with someone, or when when I see there's a need there, I'm the type of person who would go the extra mile to help someone if there's a need. But in saying that, I've had to make decisions based on the safety of my own safety, my own family, and everything else that I was subject to, meaning my occupation. So what had actually happened was I had met these two ladies. Both of them had not so similar background, and I really did care for both of them. I was really close to both of them, and I did go the extra mile for both of them. But one thing that you become professional at, and you have to be, is you learn to separate things. Like you learn to separate your emotions, you learn to separate situations, and when you have the kind of experience that I have, you have to be able to you've got to learn to separate personal and business, which is something that I can say is something that I have personally over the years been able to perform. Whereas what I'm saying is my personality is I'm not the type of person who wear my emotions on my sleeve. While I am a very loving, giving sort of a person inside, and would go the extra mile and all the rest of it, on the surface, you got to have a balance of everything. And given the circumstances at the time, it's quite vital that you don't mix your emotions and work, and you can't allow your decisions to be clouded by emotions. It's really hard to explain where I'm coming from, but at that time I was very close to both of these women, and they both had a need, and at the time all I did was, like any normal good citizen, just help somebody when there was a time of need. And that's what's happened with both of them. Although both of them came into my life like a year after each other, they both got my time and my attention when I was able to give it. At that time, I got to know them both really well, and as time went on, some things were happening to me within the workplace. I knew that and then the stalking started, and all the signs were there for me. I knew that as a single person and a single professional woman at the time, I was aware of my surrounding. I started having problems with criminal harassment, with people stalking, but they weren't good people. I just knew that something wasn't right, but you couldn't do anything about it. You just carry on with your life as normal, going to work, going home, because when people start stalking you, you really can't do anything. at the time until, something happens. So what actually happened was I was, like I said, aware of my surroundings. There were other incidents in my life at the time before then that indicated that I was being targeted. When I'm saying that, there were like car accidents that had happened before then. I'd say probably maybe 2 years before I even met these women. But it was just the way it happened. I just knew that it wasn't right. But when you get into a situation where, as a member of the public, you expect intervention, serious intervention, when you feel something is not right. What I mean by that, when you lodge complaints with the police or something like that, as a member of the public, when you know that something's not right, you kind of you have an expectation that they will take you seriously. Obviously, that hasn't been the case with my case over the years, so it has been really, really frustrating. But all you can do in a situation like that, when you have a suspicion that you've been singled out and that you have problems with criminal harassment as a single person or anyone, it can happen to anyone. It doesn't matter how much money you have. These people, if somebody has personally made a decision to target you and take you down, they will take you down. It's that easy to do. But right now I'm going to be talking about my own situation and my story, and the story that I'll be focusing on today is the beginning of when I actually lodged official legal documents, legal complaints with the police. So my story I will be taking from 2010. Those who've been watching me on Facebook would have seen those documentations that I actually put on my page. So basically, this channel is actually telling in my own words what happened. I haven't had a fair hearing. If anything, I'm still being discriminated against, even though I've done everything right. But I feel it is important to tell my story because, one, it will help other people to have an awareness of when they are being targeted, to see the signs early and not to ignore, your gut feeling, some people call it, or your conscience. Sometimes, you ignore them. There's a reason why God gives us a conscience. And I can honestly say I'm so grateful that I do have really strong senses to what's right and what's wrong. But that's only because it's come from a lifetime of experiences of going through so much. But in saying that, what I'm hoping is that the public will get something positive out of what I've gone through to avoid it from happening to somebody else. But there is a massive danger of when people are being targeted. Once a wrong syndicate decides to target an individual, once it's in motion, it doesn't stop. Common sense is it doesn't stop, which means you always have to be alert. And in my case, because I'm a single person, very private, and also there have also been things that you can't really explain in words to make people believe you, but it's your personal belief that these things are happening, but they're kind of things that it's really hard to prove unless you've got substantial evidence that it is actually happening. So while at the time I was going through these incidents, they were suspicions, they were things that made me unsettled because I knew they were happening, and from common sense and experience, I knew that I was being targeted. I knew that I was being singled out in the early stages, and I'm talking about a few years before these women came in. It was a slow, subtle thing. So in my situation at the time, I had no choice but just to go through it. and that is what has happened to me. But the advantage that I had was that I knew the court system, I knew the justice system, and so all I had to go with really to protect myself and to have a case to support my complaints was actually at the time lodge official legal complaints. Okay, so what actually happened was I'll call the friend that I'm going to be talking about and that I'm saying what she had told me had actually saved my life. I will call her subject A, and the other friend, I really did care for her at the time, but not that I did anything to disadvantage her or anything. I just knew that that I had to make decisions where I had to fully focus on what was really important around my surrounding at the time. So subject A is the person that I'll be talking about who actually gave me, what she had told me at the time saved my life, and it was a decision to believe her allowed me to make other decisions, even though it was a long way round. It was actually the only way round for me to come out of it without getting, without putting myself at risk. Well, I was at risk anyway. Because the thing is, once you're being targeted and somebody is criminally stalking you all the time, you are at risk. There's no doubt about it. But at that time, I was very close to both of these women, as I said, and eventually they both ended up being really good friends. And then subject A went out with subject B, and she kind of got to know her other side. When I'm saying is, because they both eventually, I took them, they came to church. At that time I was quite, kind of at that time I was just really kind of in my mindset. At that time I was wanting to help someone. So when my faith was really strong back then. I'm not saying it's not strong now. It is. Just situations have changed and circumstances have changed and time has changed. So you've got to change with everything as life takes place. But at that time, there was a need. They came to me. I never went to them, and I met them both at the civil counter, at the courts. We just had a one-on-one conversation. The first subject B came along first, and at that time she had walked all the way from Bethel's Beach for 2 hours, and at that time I met her at the counter. Some of my friends will already know this story, but I'm just repeating of how they came about at the time, and only that. When there's a jury trial case about somebody's life, all these information is actually, may sound not very important, but as far as like a proper investigation, when an investigator is investigating and asking people for information, they're taking in every single word that the person or the witnesses are saying, and then they have to actually ascertain the truth. So, but this is my story, so I will tell it as it is, how it actually happened. So subject B came first to me, and she said she had walked all the way from Bethel's Beach, which is like 2 hours walk. She was quite stressed, very distressed, and it was like near the end, going on to like 5 o'clock that evening, and she was very distressed. Okay, so subject B came along, and she was very distressed at the time, and I ascertained her, like I was deciding whether she was being quite truthful, but yes, she was in distress, and she had actually said that she needed somewhere to. She had actually come to the wrong place, because she said she was going to be evicted from her home. At the time, I'd realised she had actually come to the wrong place. So she was actually after for a tenancy tribunal, but she had come to the wrong one. The place that she should have gone to at the time, back then, it was at Lincoln Road. The tenancy tribunal was along there, but she had actually come to the courts. She had no money, and she was sweaty. She was very distressed, and she was really upset, and because she said she had to be at this appointment. And I could tell she was distressed, but I couldn't help it because I was still working. But I sort of wanted to make sure she was being serious, and she got quite stroppy at me, and basically she swore at me. But I didn't care about stuff like that. I was just like, just trying to determine whether she needed help or something like that. All I could do for her was I had money in my wallet, and so all I could say, I said to her, look, sorry, I can't do anything for you, but if I give you some money, you can go and catch a cab up to the tenancy tribunal for her to go and catch make it to her appointment, because she said she was going to get evicted if she didn't make it to that appointment, and she was pretty tearful, so I did believe her. So I gave her $20. I said, here, look, I've got $20, go catch a cab just outside, and so that's how that began. And as she ran out, she took off her gold watch or something, and as she was running to the elevator, she chucked me her gold watch, and she said, here, hang on to that. And I said, oh no, I don't want that. I want you to take that. I didn't want her gold watch, because I didn't even really care whether she gave me the money or not. I just said, here, take this and go and catch a cab. But she chucked me her gold watch and ran into the lift, and I didn't even know her name. And I said, oh, I don't even know your name. And she said her name, and she says, hold on to that. I said, I don't want your watch. It's okay, come and get it. But she wouldn't, and I couldn't get to her because I was behind the counter. So she runs into the lift, and she says, look, just hold on to it, I'll come back. So I left her watch in the drawer I left her watch in the drawer in my desk and waited for her to come back. 2 weeks later, she comes back, and then she tried to pay me back my money. I gave her watch, and I says, no, it's okay, I don't need the money, you keep it, because I genuinely felt she needed it, and I just, lucky for her, I just happened to have some money in my purse to help her at the time, but I didn't want it back, but she was quite persistent, and it was near the end of the time when she came back 2 weeks later to pay me back. But as we were walking down, I said to her, look, I'm almost finished work, and she needed a lift to go home, and because she said she lived all the way in Bethells Beach. So I said to her, look, if you wait around for me, I can take you home after work. So at that evening, here's this woman. I've never met her. I didn't know her from a bar of soap. But I said to her that I had to go home first, and I had to go home and check out my children. I was a single mum at the time, and I knew the kids would be home from school, so I had to go home, make sure that they were home and okay, and probably take them back with me, which is what I did with her. And at that time, she met my kids for the first time. I took my daughter with me, and then hopped in a car, to take her back, to drop her off to her home. She said she lived in Bethells Beach, which I didn't realise how far away it was until I actually took her. But I took her anyway, and then I took my daughter at the time, who was only oh, how old was she? She was still in primary school. Yeah, she was actually. She was still in primary school. So here's this woman. I didn't know her from a bar of soap, but then I took her home. And as I took her home, we parked. I realized that she wasn't even living in a proper house at the time. I couldn't even go down a driveway. Actually had to drop off, park my car up on this rocky side of road, or so it wasn't really rocky, but it was like out in a bush, and then I parked my car on the side there, and then me and my daughter, we all walked down this path towards into like a forest sort of a area, and I was expecting to see a house. And I had my daughter with me, and she was sort of like skipping ahead of us. And I was like, because, here I am dropping off this woman, and I also grabbed some food to give for her to help her, because she said she had no food and stuff like that. So I just grabbed whatever I had at that home. But my intention was just to drop her off and go home. My daughter was skipping in front of me, and I told her to, don't go too far, come back. But as we got closer, and I ascertained that she wasn't even living in a proper house, like a house that I'm living in. She was actually living in like a cabin shack sort of. It was. I was like, she just told me she had tenancy. And that's, that didn't look livable. And I was like, so I was, kind of puzzled. But as we got closer, and I was walking with my daughter, and I made her come back, called her to come back, and she held my hand, and we were walking closer. But her face changed, and I didn't know why her face changed. But as we got closer, and I realized that she wasn't even really living in a normal house. But my intention was just to drop her off and then go home. So as we got closer, her face changed, and it was quite obvious to me that something wasn't right. But as we got closer, there was a butcher knife on the door, and it looked like somebody had been in her place and had ransacked it. So she was very distressed. My daughter got a bit scared. I tried not to panic, and I didn't panic. Like I said, I'm not, I'm one of these people who are quite, when it comes to emotion, I'm very well balanced emotionally. I don't overreact. I'm not a drama queen. That's not the type of person I am. But I have to be provoked for me to react, or that's my personality. So what has actually happened was, I ascertained that she was pretty distressed, and it was quite obvious. I couldn't leave her there. I didn't know what to do. I realized myself what was going on. I did feel scared at the time. In fact, I was like, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? Here's this person. I didn't know her from a bar of soap, but then I couldn't leave her there because, it didn't look safe for her either. So all I could do at the time was, like I said to her, quickly gather your stuff, whatever you can. All I wanted to do was to get my little girl out of there and go home. And my daughter was actually scared, and she held my hand. She said, I'm scared, Mummy. But, I said, it's okay, love. We're going to get out of here soon. All I wanted to do was to get my stuff and my daughter and get her out of there. And then I ended up taking her home. So she grabbed a few belongings of her, hopped in the car, in my car that was parked. All I wanted to do was to get her out. She was upset, she was distressed, but I said to her, look, don't worry, I'll just take you home. I didn't know what to do with her. All I knew, I couldn't leave her there. So that's how she came into my life. And she came home, and she stayed with me for a little while. Because you just couldn't leave someone in a situation like that, and then that's how I got to know Subject B. Anyway, she ended up being on that trip from leaving her house. We were on our way home. There was a photo of her, of these kids, and my daughter actually noticed one of the boys in this photo. And my daughter said to me, as we were in a car, to be honest, I was actually really scared because I didn't know what I was going to do with her. I didn't know her from a bar of soap, but I just had to just, exercise faith and go along with it because I couldn't leave her there anyway. But I just thought, main thing was to get out of there and then figure out the rest later. But as we were driving home, my daughter saw a photo that she had put in the car, and in that photo, she recognized a little boy. And my daughter said to me, Mum, I know that little boy, like this. And I said, what? And she said, I know that little boy. And then she told me who the little boy was. And so I said to this girl, look, my daughter says she knows that boy. And then she was really surprised. She says, oh, do you? And she said it was her son. And what had actually happened was her son was actually my daughter's buddy. She was a buddy partner, like what they do in primary school, where they get the older children to read for the younger children. Then they buddy them up with the older children so they can learn how to read or something like that. So that's my daughter actually happened to be her buddy partner, if that's what it's called, but it's along those lines. So that made me feel like, oh, great, she's human. Like that's fine. That was confirmation for me that that she was it was actually her son. So that alone was like, oh, okay, that's all right. So she's got a son, so okay. Because I don't know her or anything, and just I was like, I didn't know what to do, but I had to go with it. So I couldn't leave her there, and so I took her home. But that was a relief to me. And then I rang my sister, one of my sisters, up on the phone. I was living at Inver Street. So everyone who's been watching my page and gathered the evidence, this is the time I'm talking about back then. So that is where I first met this woman, and that's how she came into my life. And then eventually she came to church, but it took a little bit of time for her to sort of kind of settle in and get used to everyone. But with me and her's relationship, she could relate to me, I could relate to her, because I just had a different, I can relate to basically anyone, because I'm familiar with so many different types of people and all types of walks of life. Okay, so that's how she came into my life. So subject A came along maybe a year later at the same spot. But when she had come at the counter, that is where I met her. I just served her. At the time, I was a registrar for the courts in the civil jurisdiction. My experience in that area, I was a civil disputes tribunal registrar, and I did marriage celebrant, but I also did the counter, but I did quite a bit of stuff